You're listening to the YWAM Nashville podcast. My name's Cody.
My name is Michael, and we'll be your hosts for this season. What number of podcast is this?
9.
Welcome
He
to
always forgets what number it is.
welcome to episode 9 of the YWAM Nashville podcast. Here we are.
Here we are.
We're here with our friends Brent and Ann.
Is that 9 or 8? The top of ours said 8.
It does say 8. Is this 8?
Is it 8?
I think it is 8.
Welcome to episode 8. Just kidding.
Thanks, Brent. So, they're actually both work in restricted nations and stuff occasionally. So, they're another censored guest, but their hearts are the same, whether or not they have the same names. And,
Yep.
so it's great to have you guys.
Yeah, thanks, Cody.
Thanks.
You bet.
So how long have you guys been on staff?
We came on staff in January 2002,
Wow.
but we were at another location before that as volunteers and for our schools for about a year and a half before that. So.
Wow. Cody, how old were you in 2002?
3. You just like to do that, don't you?
I do. Oh man, that's always fun. Yeah. So you guys have a family. How many kids do you have? And feel free to say as much or as little as you desire about them.
Yes, we have 4 kids. Our oldest is 23, a son, and then 2 daughters in the middle, and they're 20 and 17.
Mm-hmm.
And then our youngest is 12,
Wow.
and he is adopted from South Korea.
Come on.
And just so you have a visual, since you can't see us, I'm 6'4". I have wavy dark hair.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, totally.
And I have an awesome beard, and I am totally ripped.
He's shredded.
Yeah.
Just so you know.
Shredded.
Muscles are bulging even as we speak. And has just amazing hazel green eyes, dark hair, amazing freckles, and she looks like she's 20.
You
Okay.
mean Anne?
Yes, Anne.
And
Can you just say Anne in that tone?
Anne.
Okay, good. We can cut that in. Cut it out, Michael.
Cut it out. I'll just mute it and then it'll be fine.
I guess we
It's
look.
just boop.
Yeah.
Just bleep it out.
I think actually we look a little Asian because we were staying with a family just a couple days ago, and they did not realize our youngest was adopted.
Really?
That's
So-
really funny.
Or
Yeah.
else he doesn't really look Asian. It was really funny.
And
Yeah.
he does look a little bit like our 20-year-old daughter. So
Yeah.
they have some.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So
I could see that.
That's true.
sometimes people don't realize he's adopted, which is kind of cool.
What like descent are you?
I'm German English.
Because you have like the dark hair and stuff. So.
Yeah, but he has dark skin, a little more dark skin.
It's interesting because our oldest daughter, we were out somewhere and a waitress, I guess, was it a waitress? A waitress looked at and said real quietly, "Where is she adopted from?" Thinking that our oldest daughter was adopted. And Anne said, "Tell him where you're from." So our daughter said, "Well, I'm Chinese in the morning and I'm Mexican at night."
Brilliant. Brilliant. Right on. As you can see, they're one of the funnest families around. So
Did you tell her, and when you go to the bathroom, European?
oh man,
That's awesome.
where to get
It's not
into
even
it.
the dad joke yet.
That
But
is
speaking of, we
funny.
can move into that because we are in the presence of glory today.
It's true.
So I think we have to. We need the intro music that I haven't created yet, but
Okay.
welcome to Dad Jokes with Cody and Brent.
Yeah.
All right, Cody, you want to shoot
Yeah.
first?
Yeah, sure. I got it. I'm ready.
Okay.
So I always knock on the refrigerator door before I open, in case there's a salad dressing.
Oh, that's funny.
You, sir.
Wow. Well, it's funny. We're talking about background and our family background. When I was little, I wanted to be a millionaire just like my dad. because he wanted
Really?
to be a millionaire too.
Yeah.
There it is. See, that's the thing
too
with
bad.
Brent. You just never know. You're
Oh
like,
my goodness.
it just comes out so flawlessly. I aspire. I aspire to greatness. Oh, well, that's that.
Well, I guess we can come back to current events now.
Oh, yeah.
'Cause we kind of missed that whole
Oh, yeah.
thing.
Totally forgot
Well,
current
wait,
events.
I have a question for you guys.
Yes.
All right.
Have you ever tried doing archery blindfolded?
No, that sounds pretty hard.
You don't know what you're missing.
Oh, it just keeps
It just
coming.
keeps coming. Yeah.
It's like a fire hydrant.
I watched
good.
I watched a documentary about shipbuilding. It was riveting.
Oh, man. I seriously am enjoying this so much.
Okay, once gets going, you can't stop him.
I know.
It's like a fire hydrant.
Brent.
Brent.
Once Brent gets going,
Yep.
that's good.
Anne's like, don't get him going. We can't stop him.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, on that note, we'll jump back to the current events. Segue into the current events.
Segue backwards. So we just wanted to kind of address Black Lives Matter.
Mm.
It's kind of a big deal in today, the present right now. And just not give an answer as much as, I mean, there's tons of answers out there, but just to give like
Perspective.
some perspective. Yeah. So anyways, we were asking the Lord about it, and we felt like for us, our main focus should be, well, Michael and I specifically, but like we're not called to be left or right or in the middle or literally anywhere other than like focusing on Jesus. And so there are issues, there's a lot going on, but how can we love our neighbors in the middle of that?
Yeah, just as a, sort of a natural development out of a friendship I already had. I met a friend way back in February. We'd planned to get together when I went to his city, and that happened to be this past weekend. And we were thinking it would be, maybe a half-hour catch-up time, and it turned into this 2-hour long, just him really sharing his heart. And I'm realizing more and more, sometimes we feel compelled or obligated to make grand statements on Facebook or Instagram, make some poignant, insight. And most of all, I think what we need is relationships. And for those of us who are not Black or African American, the challenge and what is most needed is that we be listeners and learners.
Yeah.
There you go. That's what I was looking for.
Yeah.
Thanks, Brent.
That's good. Something that kind of struck me too was, I think it's Romans 1:16 talks about like the gospel being the power of God to save, and that word salvation, I can't remember what the Greek word is, but it basically breaks down into like deliverance and safety and protection and these kind of things that go beyond just like an eternal destiny, heaven or hell kind of scope, but like even into the present.
Are you talking about sozo?
It was a similar word. It wasn't
Okay.
quite sozo. It was a longer word. But anyways, yeah, so it just has like a connotation of like even in this moment, in the present. And so it's like, what is like knowing that God is not, like his heart is broken for hurting people. And like, so what does he want to do? Like, how does he want to bring deliverance? How does he want to bring safety? And it says that the gospel is the power of God to do that. Like bringing this, like bringing to people's minds like what Jesus has done, and like presenting them with Jesus and who he is and the hope he brings and all of the implications therein. Like that's what is going to bring healing and wholeness to not only individuals but to society in general, to the world. And so I think that goes for both the racial tension and the coronavirus stuff and like basically anything, it's like the gospel is the answer that the Lord has provided. Like Jesus wants to come in, do the things, and so that was just something that I've been like just really like praying into and trying to figure out like what my part does look like, and not like assuming that I'm supposed to make a Facebook post or assuming I'm supposed to ignore this whole thing or anything like that, but just like, Jesus, what is your response? What does like, you obviously care about these people in these situations. So what do you want to do, and how can I jump in with what you're doing, you know?
I just want to be like Jesus. I just want to be the person that sees the one,
Yeah.
like the one that's right in front of me,
Mhm.
and not be so self-absorbed or too busy that I miss the one person in front of me that he's placed
Yeah.
at that moment in Walmart or on the street or wherever that needs the touch of Jesus. And like the woman at the well, he just was talking to her, and she was like, you shouldn't really be talking to me, and why are you even looking at me? And
Yeah.
so that we could see, you know, the way Jesus sees.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting too, the wide range of Jesus' response to different incidents. Like, you have on one hand Jesus overturning the money changers' temple tables in the temple,
Yeah.
and then the other hand, hanging on the cross, being stripped of all his dignity from a human perspective. He says, "Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they do." So it's really a matter of just being in tune with the Holy Spirit and saying, "Lord, what are you saying in this instant, for this moment, with these people, and how you've wired me for such a time as this? What are you asking of me?" And then be obedient.
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to something we had talked about in first episode 1.
An earlier episode.
An earlier episode with Cody and I I was kind of struck with the revelation of, like, how did, like, David know what the Lord wanted to do in the face of the Philistine armies and Goliath? And it, like, came out of a place of his intimacy and, like, the secret place with the Lord, where he was like, oh, I know who the Lord is, what he's like, and what his heart is in this instance. And so I feel the courage and the boldness to, like, go after it, you know? And so I think, like, being in tune is the key. So for listeners, not only praying into these situations and praying for like peace and reconciliation and healing and all these different things, but also like kind of the proactive mindset of, like, all right, Lord, you're doing things, / you want to do things through us, you want to move through your people, so what is my part in this? Like, what can I do? You know, because I think the Lord wants to move through us. And so not only, I think, praying from, like, a distance, but praying and being willing to be the answer to the prayer, you know. So here I am, Lord, send me.
I'm ready to pray. I'm ready to listen. I'm ready to preach. Whatever you want me to do, just let me know.
Yeah.
And
so into the second point, which in light of all of these kind of things, like, the Lord is doing things, the Lord is moving, the Lord is good. And so I was wondering, at a meeting earlier, Ann shared about some stuff with the Disney stuff. And so I was kind of wondering if you could share about that.
Okay, yeah. So I have some friends who live down near Disney, and they minister to the college-age students who come from different countries to work at Disney World. And right now, they are currently stranded, basically stranded at Disney World in their dorms because of the virus. Disney shut down, so they lost their jobs, and because they're on certain student visas, they can't just work, so they're just living in these dorms, frightened, far away from home. And my friends and a lot of their church friends surrounding them down there in Orlando have been feeding the interns, taking care of their basic needs. So twice a week they bring food and toilet paper and toiletries, and these are Moroccans, Indians, kids from Japan, China, many of them not believers, most of them. And there was actually even a lady that was making special Ramadan meals for the Moroccan, some of the other African and Moroccan kids. So being the hands and feet of Jesus.
Yeah.
So what's exciting is they're here, and they're hungry and hurting, and literally hungry, but also hungry for the gospel, and really open. They've been able to pray and share with a lot of them. So a great opportunity to take what the enemy's meant for harm for good.
Yeah. And that kind of hearing that earlier, I was just, like, really stirred, because people have been, like, talking about, like, revival and different things. And I'm like, this is what it looks like.
Yeah.
Like, in the face of, like, terrible things. Like, Jesus is coming in, and he's moving, and he's taking ground and like, in a sense, taking advantage of the situations that are presented and turning the like ugly things into good things, and really moving. And so I was like, man, this is what it looks like being the hands and feet of Jesus, like loving people, being proactive, and like sharing the hope and everything, and sharing out of our, like how he's blessed us, like blessing them. It's like, it's so good.
Many of them are trying to get airplane tickets to go home too, and they can't because they're so expensive right now to some of these countries. It's not possible. So they're in a sense trapped, but also at the same time, they're where the Lord wants them to be. So that's what's exciting to me. And hopefully the government will jump on board and like renew their visas so they can stay longer.
Yeah.
We'll see.
I think one reason it probably stirred you so much, Michael, is all of us here have been overseas at different points and realized how dependent we were on the people who lived there to answer our questions or provide for our needs, point us in the right direction. And we've been in those vulnerable spots where we're just really crying out for someone to come alongside of us. So that because you've been there yourself, Michael, that's probably one reason you're like, I know how it feels to be in need of somebody with answers or a resource that I need. And so of all people, we should be the ones that are most compassionate and the most ready to jump in.
Yeah, true that.
That's great. Thanks, guys. So just to re-intro you guys, moving into talking about family and missions, Brent and Ann were both the bass directors here, actually, at one point. And I believe that Brent is now a history teacher, correct?
English and English, geography, and Bible.
Okay.
Yep.
So everything
like
but history.
It's actually English, mission / geography and Bible. So where I'm working is a homeschool co-op, and had about 51 kids last year for those different classes: the English, English, World Missions, and Geography and Bible. And one of the cool things has been a lot of you guys, like our staff here, have gone in to share on the missions end of that geography class and say, okay, you know how we've been learning about South America, like our director Michael came in and was gave everyone a soccer jersey, a South American soccer jersey, and they had to chant ole ole ole, and it just really brings it to life. So it's been a beautiful partnership, and we're just really excited about that. I'm actually getting to speak at their graduation on Saturday, which is going to be super fun. The students have gotten really dear to me. Like my daughter's also graduating this year, so they're her friends and they're kind of friends of our family, and it's just been a real privilege to invest in them.
Sweet. And then I'm gonna go go for 2-0 here, or 0-2, but I believe Ann is a physical therapist. Is that
Yes.
right? Okay, I got that one.
1-1.
There we go. 1-1.
Good job.
50-50.
The teacher thing is my bad. I was like, he's a teacher. History.
How dare you give me faulty information?
No, I love history, so that's great. That's an honor. It's like, oh, I wish I was a history teacher too, but there's just no time. So
You could be.
yeah.
Definitely.
So yeah, so we just wanted to talk about family and missions. Like, we know we have some friends, or we know a handful of people who would actually love to do missions, but they're just kind of hesitant because they're not sure what it would look like having children and being in a foreign country, how that works, if it's even wise. Like, there's just questions that come up, and we were hoping we could just talk with you guys a bit about that. You were telling me earlier that you don't actually know what it's like to do missions without kids. Is that right?
Right. So we had our oldest, who was 3, and our second as a baby when we went for our training with YWAM.
Wow.
So we quit our jobs and sold our house with our white picket fence and went with the kids on our back. And so we don't know. I mean, we did short-term trips, like, those 2-week mission trips before kids, but the long-term. And I guess I never really thought, how do I do this as a family? We had prayed and wanted and desired kids for so long that actually having our kids was a miracle. And we we're like, okay, God gave us these kids to do this with.
Yeah.
So
I think what helped too is Anne's sister
Yep.
was in YWAM for several years before we did our training school, and they were just really great examples of what it's like to do missions as a family. They lived overseas for a while in Africa, and we saw them raising their own support and how involved both of their boys were in missions. And even as little kids, they were right in the middle of the outreach to the neighborhood. And it really lowers people's defenses when they see kids out. It's one of the great strategies and ways to serve the community that a lot of churches do with Vacation Bible School. They'll reach the kids and the parents say, wow, they really love my kids. And then they're drawn by the love and the power of the gospel because they see it extended to their kids first.
Yeah. So good.
I remember one time we were in Asia on a subway, and this is when we were first getting involved as a family in missions, and Anne asked the other family how old their son was sitting on the subway, and they said how old, and our son was exactly the same age. They were both like 3 or 4, and then we said, what is their birthday? And it was exactly the same as our son's.
Wow.
And that's when we're like, whoa, the Lord is really in this. He loves having kids involved in missions. I feel like in some cases it can exponentially, provide some fruit that never would have been there otherwise, just because it is challenging to take kids. It does show very high level of trust when you bring your kids to another land and say, hey, we're trusting you to treat our kids well, and they always do.
So you've seen like the Lord move through your kids with you before, even like. That's awesome.
Right.
yes.
Sometimes, okay, this might sound really bad, but I had to punish my son. He was disciplined for singing "Jesus Loves Me" in a closed country.
Oh man,
because
that's hard.
There was a headmaster of the school where I was teaching for 3 months who really wanted our kids. They saw me bring my 2 kids to class, and they were 6 and 3 at that point, something like that, and they sang "Twinkle Twinkle Little Star," and they both knew this is a closed country. You don't talk about Jesus openly in certain settings. You wait for God's timing. So she insisted that they both go to her class and sing "Twinkle Twinkle Little Star," but neither one of them wanted to because they had to get up early and go to my class with me, and they didn't want to do that, but I really pushed them, and they did. And the headmaster was observing and loved it and said, they have to come to my class next. It's right down the hall. And my son and daughter both, especially my son, was like, there is no way. You told us one class. We sat through an hour class. We got up early. We want to go play. And I said, no, you have to do this. So he whispered to his sister, and they sang Larry Boy. The teacher put him on the desk. They both sang Larry Boy and wiggled their little bottoms at the class, and everyone's laughing. And I said to my oldest son, you have got to sing "Twinkle Twinkle Little Star" right now. And he said, he looked around, looked at me, and he said, Jesus loves me, this I know. And we're like, and so he got in trouble, but I still wonder what the impact was, because many of those had never heard the name of Jesus, and they were learning English, so they knew what that meant. And the headmaster, I think it was like a Brother Andrew thing where, Lord, you've made blind eyes see, please now make seeing eyes blind. She never thought twice about it. We never heard anything negative. In fact, she said, you have lovely children, and she gave them candy. I'm like, what is that?
That's funny.
Oh,
that's crazy.
great.
It's got to be, I don't think I've ever thought about that dynamic of you're excited because your kid is bold in front of this classroom. I don't know a lot of kids that would do that, but then at the same time you're like, no, I mean yes, but no.
Oh no.
I love your heart, but no.
Our oldest has always been like that. We were in a Muslim country, and every time the call to prayer came, he would shout in the streets.
Yeah.
Satan, no, Jesus, yes. And I'm like, shh. He was 4. He was little, but he was like, I'm not into this. This is not. And he got away with it.
Yeah.
So.
That's crazy.
So
they're like, oh, little kids. And you're like, oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
So what kinds of places have you guys been to with your family? You don't have to be super specific if it's like sensitive or something, but
The geography and missions class, for the last class, I said ask anything you want. Just email it to me ahead of time so we can have a good answer for you. And one of the questions was, how many countries has your family been to?
Yeah.
And so Ann and I just a few weeks ago had to sit down and write out, where have we been? So the short answer is we've been overseas just for a total of maybe a little over a year total if you combine everything, but it's been 15 different countries
Wow.
as a family.
And the longest time was a year.
The longest time was about a year and a half total, and then all of the 3 month, 2 weeks, all of that is maybe another year. So our hats are really off to the long-term missionaries who have lived there for 10, 15 years. I think your guest last week had been overseas for a long time, and we had visited her overseas, and they're real heroes. Like, we really, really admire them. But on the other hand, we feel like we've had a front row seat to what the Lord is doing all over the world.
Yeah.
And the thumbnail sketch of all of it is we've been to maybe 4 or 5 predominantly Muslim countries. We've been to Asia, and Anne has been back and forth to Asia more than I have, but that's been our go-to. Years ago, we got the verse Psalm 121:8. He will guard your going out and coming in from this time forth and even forevermore.
Yeah.
And when we were overseas, one time a church group came through, and I'd been asked to lead a strategic mission school here at Nashville. And I was saying no because I felt like, we're supposed to stay here. But then we were also pulled to adopt, which meant home visits in the States. And we were like, what do we do? And this church group came through at a really timely place and said, Brent, do you feel that you're to be a martyr or a multiplier? Are you a martyr or a multiplier? I'm like, I really chewed on that. And I felt like from that point on, both Ann and I realized we're supposed to multiply the work in other places by really encouraging those who are doing it day in and day out, because they really are heroes to us. So that's why we've been so many different places. Our role is to champion those who have their feet on the ground firmly planted for a long time.
Wow. Yeah, it kind of reminds me of like Paul going to different places and like encouraging the body and kind of pouring out in those different seasons.
Yeah. But our specifically our girls have always been called. One is called to Africa and the other is called to Asia. So we've looked for opportunities to try to get them there. So I was able to take our 17-year-old to Uganda when she was only 11. And she had special permission because her uncle was leading the trip, because it wasn't supposed to be that young. But you guys know her, and she has an older soul.
yeah.
She's always been a little more older than her age. And we were doing ministry at a church late at night, Africa, all day, all night. Yeah. I kind of forgot that she was nearby somewhere, but when I looked around, I couldn't see her. So I got up and I was walking around, and she was just around the corner from the church, sitting outside like a slum shack house with a ton of like young women, street women. And she was just having conversation with them. And she looked at me and she said, "I got it, Mom. I'm good." So I just kind of backed off a little bit, but she was just sharing her story and how the Lord had been so faithful to her, to these 20-something-year-old women. And I was like, whoa. Yeah. And I know she's called there to those people. And then Brent was able to take her back to Africa last year. So Brent and my sweet 17-year-old.
And it was her idea. It was, at the time, she was 15, and she really wanted to go serve this family that we gotten to know and really love. And she was planning on going by herself or taking a friend. And we were trying to pray through who would go with her. And I was like, no, it's supposed to be me. And she did really difficult ministry with street kids and those who had gotten in fight. One's had a broken rib. It was hardcore ministry for a 15-year-old girl, and she absolutely loved it. She was just thriving, and that was really exciting to see.
Yeah,
that's great. How do you think the missions experience has been like for your kids? Like,
Or
in general.
if you'd ask them, they'd all say they really loved it. Like they wouldn't look back and wish, because we do this thing. We're like, let's picture our lives if mom and dad had stayed full-time physical therapist, full-time college English professor. How would it look differently? And they're like, oh, that's kind of scary. Like they like that they're very comfortable in an airplane, in transit, on the go. Like, who's the next person I can talk to? I don't know if they're uniquely created, that the Lord uniquely created them to be very adaptable. But we've also had to check ourselves too, because, you know, when you're in the ministry and you're going and you're seeing the person, when we lived in Asia, we would be out a lot late at night. And this was something the Lord reminded me. My oldest son was in the 4th grade and we were out late a lot of evenings, and he was trying to do his homework. I remember he was sitting on this friend's couch in this little apartment, like dirty floor, and he couldn't quite get comfortable, and he could not get his homework done, and I could see his face getting so frustrated. It's like 11 o'clock at night, you know, really late, and he just looked at me, and we left, and we got home that night. He was just like, Mama, we have got to stop doing this. We've got to stop going out every night. Could we please back off a little bit? And so just hearing your kids, like, that was something that we learned quickly, but just listening to them even when they're little, like, and their needs too.
We had good friends when we were overseas for the year and a half in the one block, and they're just an amazing family. They're with Wycliffe, but we realized from watching them and learned so much, Cody and Michael, just from seeing. It changed my mindset. I grew up on a dairy farm, used to hard work. Hard work is like one of our family's highest values, grandparents all the way back.
Yeah.
And I was watching them and been like, wow, if it was up to me, I would probably drive my family into the ground. But watching them, they were modeling what's sustainable long term, and their kids were thriving. They were all just really happy kids. And I was like, that says so much more than frenetic ministry and miserable kids, to have a low-key relational ministry and really happy kids. So I learned just from watching them.
Yeah.
What are some things that you learned from them that you could like pinpoint?
Sure. Alistair Begg had a message the other day, and he was talking about how Ephesians 6:1 talks about children, obey your parents in the Lord, and he said, so this wasn't for parents to pass on to their kids. It was directly to the kids who would have been in the fellowship with the parents. And they didn't really have separate Sunday school type stuff for their kids. Their kids were really in the meetings with the big kids. They would play violin or do something on the keyboard, or just hang out and listen. They're unusual kids as far as being focused. But they never seemed like whiny or miserable, and they were totally no nonsense. They were real kids, you know. Yeah. They were blunt and everything. This is kind of boring. What's going to happen next? But then I think it helped the grown-ups who probably were also thinking, gosh, it's getting kind of boring, to liven it up for the kids. Yeah. And so to answer your question, Cody, I learned from watching them to really integrate the kids into ministry, and at times let the kids initiate ministry. And they made sure that their kids were well taken care of as far as having their resources for school and that sort of thing. But they also really listened to them. Like some of their kids were interested in swimming. They're like, let's figure out where the pool is. Let's get them involved. And our kids rode their coattails and took swimming lessons overseas with their kids for 6 months. It was beautiful. But they really made sure that they were a family who served the Lord, rather than two individuals serving the Lord and dragging their kids along. And they better hang on tight. It was a very different mindset.
But the mom was very strategic in spending individual time with the kids. Like, I'd see her at the bread market with the littlest, you know, one morning. And then we lived in the same neighborhood. So then the next morning I'd see her with the oldest, like, power walking because he needed to get a PE credit for his homeschooling. And I'd see her, like, individually. I'm like, how in the world does she do that with all those kids? But just taking, like, 30 minutes a day. Or and just realizing that was her main role, living life there as a mama who loved Jesus. So,
and I think she multiplied her time. Both parents multiplied their time well by really trusting the older kids with significant responsibility. They would say to the oldest, you're in charge of packing these 3 kids' lunch and making sure that they have their homework done.
Oh, on the trains too. Traveling with all those kids, craziness, people pushing you, and we'd travel with them a lot. And I was like, oh, one of their kids is going to get lost because we only had 3 at the time.
Yeah.
You know, so that never, like the oldest always had a youngest, and they partnered together, and their kids are all really good friends. 3 of them are out of college and have jobs and everything, and still really good friends. So it's neat to see. But
That's great.
Yeah. And of course, with bumps in the road, nothing's ever completely streamlined perfect, but by and large, they were great role models for us, and we saw them fight through the bumps in the road really well.
Mm-hmm.
That is actually a good transition into what I wanted to talk about next. What are some mistakes that either you made or that you've seen other people make, not to be like condemning or anything, but just that that you like know better now looking back, you know?
I think we realized that the families who really struggled in the field started to let ministry creep into the marriage and to the family life so much. Like, ministry has to be done. You know, there's certain things that you're being faithful if you do them, and you're being irresponsible if you don't. But the families who did the best weren't worried about creating an amazing newsletter to impress lots of people. They really took care of their marriage first, and then they took care of their kids right alongside of it. It wasn't, we're putting our kids ahead of our marriage. We're going to have a really good marriage, and our kids are going to thrive because of this marriage and because we're looking out for them. And the ministry is going to flow out of that love for each other and love for the Lord. It wasn't a skewed striving kind of thing. It was very relational.
Yeah.
So
That's great.
The mistake that I saw several times, and in a few cases it led to real sad developments in the field with families kind of disintegrating or couples disintegrating overseas. What I saw happen was they sort of lost sight of God's heart for them first and started extending it to other people without realizing we're putting our goals ahead of really loving each other well.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hearing you say your priorities are really important.
Yeah, those daily
missions.
quiet times are
Yeah.
everything. Like, are you really getting God's heart for you and for the day ahead?
Yeah.
I think we made a mistake maybe initially when we moved to Asia, is we just went with the plan that was made for us, that was made for everybody else on the team, and we were the only one with small kids. And so we were both in language school every day, and my youngest was 3, and so what do you do with her? You hire a local nanny, and here's a nice lady that will work. And she was a believer, but first of all, my daughter did not like her, just because she was her. She was the 17-year-old that thrived in Africa.
Yeah.
And she wanted her mom. And we just did it, like, for a whole semester. And she was misbehaving and eating all my chocolate. And then the nanny would call me in class in her broken, she spoke hardly any English, and she was minority. And I was like, what? She's like, small child, no clothes, bad girl. You must come home now. She's not listen. So
just to clarify also, she's 3 when
She was
Anna's
3.
talking about.
Yes.
She said she's the
She's
17-year-old,
not 17.
but she was just clarifying
was.
that they're the same person.
Right.
But
When
she's 3 at the time of this story.
Yes. When this little child was 3. And so Brent and I prayed about it, and we were like, we have got to do something to change. And it was very difficult because we had to go to our leadership and be like, this needs to change. They're like, you're fine. And we're like, no, this needs to change. And like, fight for your family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
that's
we
good.
went to class different times. I went to class less. So our daughter would be home when the other kids came home from school, and not by herself with a nanny. And she remembers it now, and she says that made like a world of difference
Wow.
in her like appreciation of the country and the people, because she wasn't really having very much fun at first. So I think you can lose your kids
Yeah.
to the ministry, right? And so I was like, yikes, the Lord really stopped me in my tracks
That's
on
good.
that one.
Yeah.
It's interesting that like she still remembers that to this day as something that was like a good change, you know, and
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I kind of. I mean, I can't imagine with kids, but like Alina and I found that in Brazil as far as like our marriage, because we're like leading a team, and I don't know, there's kind of a lot of stressful things happening, and we were like, man, why are we like always like angry at each other, and like just, you know, there's so much like stress, and then we realized that we weren't taking like any time to just be together,
Yes.
like, and talk, like have conversations, like literally at all. And it was so easy to get to that place we didn't even notice it. And then when we started like, all right, we're gonna take like an hour before bed and just like walk around outside and like hang out and process life, like it just like was so much better, and the day was more fruitful and our leading was more fruitful. So I can imagine
That's so good.
it's like times 10 with your whole family, you know. And I think like the
Yes.
perspective of like, this is your ministry team. Like if your ministry team, like if you went on a YWAM team and it was exploding and was terrible, like no one would feel bad that you need to like figure that out,
right.
you know. But I think like with your family, it's like the same thing, but probably more so, you know.
Right.
Right.
It's crazy.
and then I'm single guy over here.
Ladies, take note.
Like,
That sultry voice you hear is at YWAM Nashville and single. So come to a DTS.
He's
That's
a really
the prerequisite.
nice guy.
Yeah, quality person.
Long flowing hair.
Don't be sorry.
guys, I appreciate you. Sweet. So, moving on. Anyways, so the last question, well, second to last question I had about the topic was, do you think, like, a lot of people would be worried about it being like too much, like, I've talked to people who are like thinking about how hard it is to be a parent in the States where they're not under culture stress, and then thinking about doing that in a different country, and they're just worried it might be too much. So what would you say to them?
One of the perspectives I think we've learned and are learning is that God gives so much grace when you're obeying him, no matter the setting. And some of what the kids have learned the most about maturing and responsibility and self-discipline, all of that, and walking with the Lord on a daily basis has been by going overseas. So sometimes we look at it as, oh my goodness, if we move to a different setting, we're going to lose all these resources. There's, you know, the local baseball league, there's the dance activities for the girls, there's what are we going to do over there? How do we raise our kids well in this, you know, third world environment or second world environment? And we automatically have that paradigm of the resources and the things available are what's important, and the comfort level is important. But sometimes the appropriate challenges with God in the mix are what really help them mature and grow. I've seen, you know, missionary kids that have the maturity. They're, you know, 9, 10, 11-year-old. They have the maturity level of, you know, a 28-year-old in the States, just because they've been forced to rely on God and trust him.
Yeah.
And they know consequences of decisions because they've seen it play out in their own family, and they're involved in the decision-making process. So sometimes we look at it as God has to come through, or this is going to be a disaster, when God's saying, I'm not going to downgrade you by moving your family overseas. This is actually a promotion. You're going to get exposure to a maturing process that's more fun and more dynamic, and will move you along at a place where I have designed you for in a much better way than it would be if you stayed in the States. And one of the things that I tell the missions geography students, I was like, one class, I think it was the last class, maybe last year, I was really raw with them. And I said, okay, a lot of you signed up for this class because you needed geography credit, and the missions was thrown in there. So your parents kind of like, it'll be good. You'll get the geography credit. Maybe you'll learn something interesting about missions. And I said, a lot of you and a lot of your parents are worried that the missions part is off limits, that that's not going to be something that you go into, because of course our family's not like that. That's not safe. It would be such a tragedy if you went and lost your life overseas. And I said, so many of you are resigned to losing your life here in the States in a different way. You're going to go to jobs that are uninspiring. You're going to work for something that's no bigger than getting a car that you really like or making a good down payment on a home. When you look back at the end of your life, the real tragedy is you lost your life stateside. You lost your life at home instead of gaining something much more significant of eternal purpose. So I'm just going to throw it out there. I'm like, you're not going to hear this from very many people, but I'm going to tell you, do you want to look back on your life and know you should have gone for more, but you settled for less just because that's what was expected of you?
Come on.
So, and it's the same way with
that's so
families.
Yeah.
We took our kids when they were young, and so that's an advantage. They don't miss their friends or school as much when they're younger, maybe starting elementary school, but much younger than that. They just want to be with mom and dad and go have fun. But I think it's important when the kids are older, junior high, high school age, and your family, like right now in the States, you're like, we're going to move to South America and live in a hut. And you don't ask your kids or pray with them about it. Obviously, that's a problem.
Yeah.
So just involving your older kids, if you've been the kind of family that prays and makes decisions together, then it's going to flow. And we've always done that when our kids were at the age, even when they were little, but when they were at the age that they started hearing the Lord's voice, let's pray about this together. What is he saying? Because once we left my youngest in the States, and we left him for a month because we took an older team back to Asia, and we just felt like that was the right thing to do, even though he could have handled it. Was he 9 or 8?
Yeah, something like that.
And it turned out fine for him, and it turned out fine for the other kids. But now he'll be like, you're not doing that again next time I'm coming, because he hears all the adventures that he missed.
Yeah.
But we felt like it was going to be a very fast paced, and my mom kind of wanted to hang out with him. So, but just asking the older kids, which now we only have, after this summer, we'll only have one at home.
Wow.
And so praying and talking about even what we're doing with him. He's 12, and he's like, what? Or he'll hear us talking in the other room. He'll be like, what are we talking about doing? Because it's not just us, it's all of us.
Yeah.
So
I think that's a big, key underlying philosophy that, I've, seen in your family, but I also just hear you saying, and I think is a big key thing that I'm thinking as far as if I was taking my family into missions, which will definitely happen, but is this valuing them, and that the Lord wants to move through them and wants to speak to them, and not being I don't know, not counting them out and them hearing the voice of the Lord. And that seems like better discipleship, actually. You're actually raising them up in the ways of the Lord.
Yeah.
Right.
One of the most valuable things we've ever done as a family is we had one summer where we were going to come alongside another family overseas for about 3 months. So we've had, the time frame varies so much. It's the 3 month, 2 weeks, whatever, 10 days, depending on the situation and what we're able to do. But this one summer we had about 2 months, solid months, to come alongside another family overseas. And it was just our family. We weren't leading a team. And we told them, along the way, we stopped and visited our son's orphanage where he was, and we were like, we are leading a team. We are leading a team of our family members. So we treated it like a YWAM outreach with our kids, and said,
That's
every
awesome.
morning we
That's
woke
so
up,
fun.
we prayed as a family. We would say, we told them from the outset, our prayer is that each of you will really know what your gifting, what your design is, in the kingdom of God, that you would have a sense of, and it really came out. One daughter, the worship part, and our son, leadership and administrative ability.
our younger daughter was feeding all the homeless, even when people were yelling. Actually, both the girls were.
Yeah.
Our youngest daughter was like, why are those other college students ignoring that dude over there who's she was 9. She's like, why do they not see him? I'm like, I don't know, but you do. What are you going to do about it? So it was so awesome. And our adopted son's on the train, and the locals were trying to convince me that he was my friend's son. Like, I was like, no, he's mine. But they're like, he's not really yours. No, I'm like, he's really mine. And explaining like the heart of adoption from the father, and just like, I'm like, we always need to take this son with us because it opens so many doors.
Yeah.
But it was funny.
It was so much
We
fun.
literally thought, why are YWAM outreaches so fruitful? How do they do it? You know,
Yeah.
how have the best outreaches gone? And we tried to follow that pattern, you know, and we did a debriefing with them at the end. How did God work in you? What did he show you about his character? What was one highlight of the trip? What was the hardest part for you? What did you learn from it? Like literally from our youngest was how old?
5.
5, all the way up through our oldest, who was maybe 13, 15. Yeah. So we just kind of walked through all of it. And we believe they've carried those same lessons with them through their ministry, and just their approach to relationships ever since has been really cool. And that was a gift from the Lord that we were surprised it worked out so well. And we're continually grateful God gave us that short little season with them.
Yeah. I also would like to testify that your kids are like seriously some of the coolest people.
I was just
And,
thinking
like,
that myself,
they-
actually.
Like whenever I hear them like talk about Jesus, I'm like, I feel like you're more mature than most of us, honestly. Like,
We have, Ann and I have a theory where like the Lord looked at us and said, you guys get so stressed out over little stuff. Here, we're going to give you 4 beautiful kids who can really make your life easier, not harder. He looked at us and was like, man, they really can't
He's like, they
handle
need
it.
help.
They
Yeah,
need
they
some
can't-
help. They don't need a hint.
Speak for
Okay,
yourself.
They looked at me, not Ann, and said, "Ooh, he can't really handle."
What? But what about your rippling muscles over
That's
there?
right.
so one thing I'm thinking about that I don't think we had in our like written down questions, but I know you said that you like sold your house and all this kind of stuff, and for a lot of people that the whole like material aspect of it, like being unsure of like how to go about like selling a house, selling a car, like switching locations, but specifically the material and like kind of the money side of it, like a lot of people are like, how are we going to provide for a family? Like, of course we need to have like do the kind of regular job thing versus like raising support and that kind of thing. So I was just wondering if you could speak into like how that kind of went with you guys, because I'm sure you've had, you know, scary faith building times with money or times of blessing and fruitfulness, you know.
Yeah. So we have so much respect and gratitude for our friends. Like, I've given this bold call to go into missions, but we've said to our close friends and family, we could not do what we're doing if you hadn't also been obedient to what the Lord is calling you to. So, for instance, I've told my brother very directly, I said, thank you for continuing to stay on the farm. It's a dairy farm, and he works extremely hard. And I think that pull of family would have made me want to stay and just fulfill this family legacy and not drop the ball. If I was an only child, it would have been extremely hard to leave and to go on a mission. So we recognize that there's countless people, you know, all over the world that are supporting missionaries, and that's exactly what God's called them to do. So we don't believe that everyone is called to sell their houses and go into missions, because we couldn't do what we do if others didn't have the houses and the high-paying jobs and were providing for us, you know, financially partnerships. But the process of letting go of things, like you either believe him or you don't, when Jesus says basically the Son of Man has no place to lay his head, and if you turn back, you're not fit for the kingdom. Like, we can't keep looking over our shoulder and say, well, we should have hung on to the house. It's been funny how God's provided for exactly what we needed at exactly the right time. We had a van just very recently, within the last few months, had a van that was dying, and it pretty much died
In our driveway. Yay.
coming back from a long trip.
Of all the places to die, though. I mean,
Yeah, exactly. It was an 8.5 hour trip, and it died right in our driveway. At the same time, our church was raising an extravagant vehicle fund for us. We had no idea how hard they were working, and almost like passing the baton. As soon as the one vehicle died, they called us and said, are you sitting down? We've raised this money for your next vehicle. And we're like, God, you are really
Wow.
good. And
Wow.
But you know how you
Yeah.
say those things out loud and it's not really a prayer?
yeah,
I've
Yeah.
said out loud to my kids, I've always just really wanted a Jeep. You know, put the top
Yeah.
down, right on the beach. And so that's what we got. We got a Jeep. You could put the
Come
top
on.
down. It had that sport drive. But it wasn't even like after we got it, I was like, wait a minute. I think I might have said something out loud a little while ago. But I just want to tell the story.
So good.
Like for me, I don't know if it's been like sometimes I've been weeping like to the Father and like, what are you doing? My child needs to go to the dentist and I have no money or whatever. That was a very specific incident. And I was standing at the kitchen window, you know, saying to the Lord, okay, if you don't bring me the money for the dentist like today in the next hour, I'm just calling and canceling because I'm not going to use the credit card to go to the dentist because that's not really you providing. And so I just, whatever. And then a few minutes later, the kids come running in the house. They're like, Mom, there's a man in the driveway. We don't know who he is. Come help us. And so I went out there and there was a man there and he said, hi, I don't know if you recognize me. My son plays soccer with your son. I'm like, oh, yeah. He's like, I just wanted to drive over and personally hand you this because it's been on my mantle for days. And I just thought I'm just going to drive it over and give it to you. And it was $100 check, exactly what I needed to go to the dentist
Come on.
that day.
That's great.
And that's just one of the many stories. But like the Lord's like, are you content in plenty and are you content in need? Like, are you content in plenty and are you content in need? And yes, we've had weeks where we ate not the greatest, like cereal and things that cost less money. And then we've had seafood and we've been able, people are like, here, take this and go out to eat. But we've never not been able to eat and we've never not been able to, but I think you do learn to lay down your rights to that thing that you think you want or that thing you think you need
Yeah.
because you don't really need it.
Yeah.
But
yeah, and also just to speak to the, honestly, I remember thinking back, I would get actually angry when I would remember these testimonies or these, you know, prophetic word given that you will be blessed beyond measure or whatever, and that didn't happen. Or, you know, you pray for something really hard and it doesn't turn up. And we saw God building our character through all these things. And I think, to be fair, we need to acknowledge there are times where we're like, where are you, God? We don't see provision here, and we really thought you were going to come through. You know what we need and when we need it, and it didn't seem like it was ever going to show up. And I think those extended times of waiting and expecting and even the frustration was character building, because when it did happen, we're like, we were doubting you. Why were we doubting you? And revisit that. And then you go to the standing stones when he did provide. And that's also to say we can't presume on God. We can't say, God, everybody needs to be a missionary. Everybody needs to take their family in missions, because that may be, like way back to the beginning of our conversation today, Michael, that may be saying, no, I insist on being a martyr and not a multiplier.
Yeah.
It could be someone saying, I am selling my house and I'm going to serve you because selfishly, I want the glory of being a martyr for you. And God saying, I didn't ask that. It would be like Abraham shrugging off God saying, I don't want you to sacrifice Isaac. No, I'm going to do this to show how much I love you. God's like, I never asked you that.
Yeah. That's really good.
Well, right on. Well, thanks, guys. That was
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you.
You got some great stuff. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.
It's
so
been a
much.
joy.
So much wisdom.
Oh,
I have
gosh.
one more question just for fun. It's kind of becoming a tradition. But, okay, so if
Oh,
you
this
could
is
time
fun.
travel to any era in world history once, where would you go and what historical character would you talk to and why? You don't have to have the once part. I forgot I took that out, but
Also, for the sake of it, we might exclude biblical characters.
Bible characters.
yeah, I was
Because
wondering
I feel like
about
if
that.
you,
was
everybody's like, well, Jesus.
On the one hand,
Of course.
like we do love Jesus, and like if that's
Yeah.
your answer, that's fine.
Right.
or like
But I'm
Paul,
also like-
or, you know.
Yeah, for the sake of the argument.
This didn't take me very long. I don't know why I want to do this, and some of these people are still alive. It's the people that were living in Europe during World War II that were the people that gave safe haven to the Jews,
Yeah.
that hid them that like risked their lives, and many of them lost their lives because when the Jews were discovered, they were also discovered. So what kind of deep, gutsy faith that they had, you know, and it was really living out to lay their life down for their friends. And also they had such a strong sense of right and wrong and justice. I mean, if we didn't have those kind of people, if there were not God-fearing men and women during that time, it would have looked a lot different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But those type of people, I'm like, I want to be like that. I want to be so God-fearing that I will never falter, like,
Yeah.
to save the one who needs saving and fight for justice.
Yeah.
So maybe just to go back during that time and be in the attic and hear the
That's crazy.
conversations.
That's so
Yeah.
interesting. I
Yeah.
never would have guessed.
Yeah.
That's really
Right
good.
on. What about you, Brent?
Brent is smarter than me.
No, mine would be, it's kind of interesting, the whole dynamics around the racial issues today. And one of my heroes of the faith, because he was a guy with his own issues. He had to struggle for a while to kind of have an understanding of what it means to truly love everyone unconditionally. And his name is Bartolomé de las Casas. He was a Spanish priest who was part of the whole, the colonization of Latin America. So in the early 1500s, he went to Hispaniola, basically Dominican Republic and Haiti. He went there and helped colonize Hispaniola, and then helped colonize Cuba. He was a mover and a shaker. He was an influential guy. And he started really looking at how they were treating the Native Americans and being like, this isn't right. He wasn't like this superhero who dove in and said, all of this is unjust. He was part of what was unjust. He saw all the things that were being done that were cruel and inhumane, all the Native American slaves, and was like, wait a second. If I'm saying I love God, I can't let this happen. So it took him a while. It wasn't an overnight thing. He really wrestled through issue after issue. What does it mean to have slaves? What does it mean to stand up against this? And then he went for it. He would go to the Spanish government and say, what you're doing, what all of us have been doing, is not right. He was very bold about it. He lost a lot of friends and a lot of influence. He sold all of his land, sold all of his slaves, and said, no, I completely repent. I'm turning my back on this whole way of life and this whole approach to how I've seen fellow human beings. And I like the fact that he was a work in progress, but coming out the other end, he really there was no compromise. He was like, I want to see justice done because I love people, and he didn't care what it cost him, and it cost him quite a bit.
Yeah. Man,
Wow.
that's so good.
What was
I
his name?
Bartolomé de las Casas.
Bartholomew of the Houses.
De la Casas of the houses.
Bartolomé de las Casas. It's like in Spanish, it's Bart of the houses.
Okay.
Perfect. I didn't expect you guys to have such interesting and well thought out answers.
What about you, Cody?
I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't.
I didn't think it through real carefully, but I've always thought ancient Greece was fascinating.
Yeah, it's a good
But,
one.
yeah. And I don't know who I would talk to.
Is ancient Greece, that's the
Maybe,
one with John Travolta and Olivia
Oh,
Newton-John?
yeah.
That's the first one.
No, I haven't seen that either, so it's
It's not good.
and disapproves. Disproves.
I think for me, pretty much any revivalist, probably. But somebody I've been thinking too is, I wish I could talk to Keith Green. Like,
Aw.
I feel like a lot of things that he says, I'm like, right? That's how I feel.
Yeah.
But then I'm like, he's not here to reference and mentor people, who follow that whole type kind of, because I'm curious where he'd be now,
Yeah.
Right.
and how that journey would have gone.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know anybody else that's on that kind of level, you know?
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. Oftentimes I'm like, man, I wish I could talk to Keith Green and be like, what do you think about this issue, you know?
Yes.
But, or same with like Charles Finney or pretty much any of those guys.
Right on. Well, as far as stuff going on at the base, we've still got 2 discipleship training schools coming up. There's one September 20th of this year, it being 2020 AD.
Yeah.
And there's another one on March 28th of next year.
Yep.
21.
And that's it's the discipleship training school. It's a 5 to 6 month school. First 3 months is living here at the base, being in community. You get some sweet teaching, and it's just a really awesome time. And then you spend the next 2 or 3 months in a cross-cultural outreach, and it'll change your life as long as you go after Jesus, you know.
Yeah, just a small caveat there.
If you press in, it'll change your life.
Yeah, we also just got back from a Memphis outreach, and I and our 2 guests here were there, and then so it didn't end up looking like we thought it would look like. Like, we went fully prepared for all this crazy street evangelism and stuff, because, you know, we're close to downtown and there's all this rioting and stuff, and we just want to go love people. But we did end up going to love people, but it looked a little different. Our ministry connections there, who are like an extension of YWAM Nashville and our family working in Memphis, they were really burnt out, and we ended up actually kind of watching their kids and doing some ministry with kids in the area and cleaning their house up for them. And we went and prayed at the site of the Memphis massacre just for the city, and we did like some spiritual warfare and stuff. And and we went to a foster care orphanage home type thing. She just loves kids in the neighborhood. So that was good as well. And so we stay with host homes when we go. And the guy that I stayed with, his name was Pat. It was Pat. I feel like it's safe to go with. But anyways, Pat was awesome. And he took really good care of us, and we had a great time. And we left him a note when we left. We're like, it was awesome. Thanks so much. And then he just reached out to me the next day, and he was like, I had so much fun too. It was great. You guys are really encouraging. I haven't been in my Bible in a while, and I just feel like encouraged to start again. And I was like, that's great. It was awesome. So those are just a few things that really stood out to me. Did you guys want to share anything about the Memphis outreach?
I think maybe the main thing was just how receptive and kind people were, just really gracious. I was honestly surprised how open people were just to talk about racial issues, to really be welcoming, and felt like it was a timely outreach. Just individual conversations were amazing. A real blessing. Like, we felt valued, and like they appreciated us being there. So for me, that was a highlight.
I just have been praying a lot. Just interceding a lot for the kingdom and for Jesus to show up unexpectedly in big ways, and he's doing it. So if you're reading the bad news, find the good news.
There you go.
People coming to know him, and that Jesus is still, I just really felt his presence in the streets there when we were praying, and that he is not unaware, and he is not sleeping. He's still on the move, and drawing people to himself. So
Come on.
I'm
Excellent.
encouraged from going. So maybe don't go at night, but if you want to go during the day with some nice friends, it's good. Yeah, and we had our kids there, and we had a fire engine pass by us when we were praying on the street, and kind of scared me at first, but I'm like, wait, they're smiling and waving.
Yeah.
And so,
They saw us praying, and they're like, oh, we like prayer.
Right.
I was like,
So
sometimes we're afraid of those spiritual giants, that fee-fi phobia.
Yeah.
And God's saying they're not really giants. They're, we look at it as like a shadow on the wall. They're huge when you see the shadow, but then when you see the insect that's making it, you're like, oh, that's the best that the enemy is throwing at us. It's not a giant at all. It's something that's very easy to relate to and turn over to the Lord. So
Come
That's
on.
good. And then, so that was the Memphis outreach. There's lots more stories we could tell, but moving along. So, and then Michael and his wife went to D.C.
Woohoo!
That we did.
Do you want to tell us about that?
Sure. And I kind of just want to testify to like the Lord's like timing for everything. And we are kind of talking about it earlier, but like they planned this Memphis outreach before they knew that there was going to be all this racial tension and stuff. And then we didn't know that at David's tent in D.C., like it was going to be Tennessee week and how all that was going to work. And so like it was cool that we felt to go to D.C. and just how the Lord like orchestrated that during Tennessee week while our friends were in Memphis doing ministry. But then also like they're in a key place being in Memphis for racial like reconciliation to, be happening. And then we're in the capital, and there was a lot of rioting there, and we saw all kinds of people with signs and, we saw all the military and different people. And so, yeah, it was just like crazy timing. And I'm like, oh, this was so the Lord, like there's no way that we could have like orchestrated this ourselves. But yeah, so we went there and we just got to spend time on the National Mall there. They have a tent, which isn't currently open to the public right now, but it's been going 24/7 for the last like 5 years or something. I could be wrong on that, but yeah, for a long time. And so they're keeping it going with their crew, and they invited us up, and so we got to just jump in with that and worship and pray right there on the National Mall, and just kind of like be in the midst of all this craziness, and be in like a key place, just like lifting up Jesus and proclaiming Jesus, and so it was, I don't know, I just think a really key thing. And like we don't fully see like the impact of such things, and like you guys going to that specific site to intercede where the massacre happened, like I think we just don't see like what's really like fully happening there, and so I don't know, I just think it was a really key thing. But it was really good for us, really restful. Like spending time with Jesus is great, and when that's like what you're there to do and that's what you're doing, like it's so life-giving.
It was 4-hour sets.
Yeah, we did 4-hour sets for 4 days in a row, which sounds tiring, but it went by really fast and was surprisingly easy. So,
yeah.
Shout out to David's Tent. Check them out. They're awesome.
Woohoo!
Yeah. They're good friends of ours.
Hi.
Oh, and the last thing that I have, just as another base update kind of thing, we're putting together a youth outreach team. We have one together in general, but we're not actually doing anything yet. But we're going to be working with different ministries and churches in the area, and we want to just like go to some events with them, or host some events here, or go places like the mall or something and just find teenagers and just minister to them, pray for them, share Jesus with them. So we're putting together a group to organize events for such things, and we're going to be doing that here soon.
Yeah.
So
if you are in the
news.
area and want to connect with YWAM Nashville and this awesome team of people doing ministry, and we're down to jump in with whatever, then you can email us at podcast@ywamnashville.org or info@ywamnashville.org for general requests, but whatever. Pick one. It's us.
Yeah. If you want to say something about the podcast, email podcast.
Yeah.
And if you want to say something about the base in general or ministry, then you can reach out to the info box.
Or
they're both
coming
us,
to visit, or
for the sake of consistency, maybe 30 years from now that'll be a more strict thing, and somebody will be like, I found this dinosaur podcast that said. So.
Also, if you want to support the base in any way, if you want to support Brent and Ann and their family and what the Lord's doing in them, or literally anything that we do around here, it's all fundraised for. then you can also email us at the info@ywamnashville.org, and we'll get you hooked up. And yeah,
Thanks, guys.
Thank
thanks so
you.
much for joining us.
Thank
It's
you.
been great.
All right,
All right.
peace and love.
See you guys later.
All right.
Bye.
Thank
See
you.
you later.
Bye.
Bye.